There are several approaches to and several models of qualitative data analysis in social science research. The current presentation is aimed at giving a general definition of qualitative data analysis, and it also aims at an elaboration of the general process of qualitative data analysis with simple examples from the field of education. So first, what is qualitative data analysis? Qualitative data analysis, or QDA, is generally the process of systematically examining qualitative data. What type of data is that? It is generally non-numerical data, and the sources of such data is basically text or audios or videos or images. Generally, the audio, video, or images are also you can say transcribed into or converted into textual data to analyze, that we analyze to identify patterns and themes and meanings and insights. Generally, the commonly qualitative data analysis is used in social sciences in related fields such as in education, psychology, sociology, and other disciplines. The aim of this type of data analysis is to get a broader understanding into human experiences, behaviors, and social phenomena. Now, generally, the sources of qualitative data include interviews. So when we are conducting interviews, we get narratives from, for example, from stakeholders. For example, if we are conducting interviews with school leaders about their management styles, that will be like a form of qualitative data. Similarly, focus groups, for example, is you can say a group discussion where students, for example, in this case, discuss their learning experiences, and so the researcher is interested in knowing the learning experiences of students, and so they conduct focus groups where several students participate in group form in the interview. Observations, again, notes from, for example, from classroom behavior or teaching techniques. So in this case, the researcher takes, for example, notes while observing classroom behavior and teaching techniques. And similarly, documents. School, for example, school policy documents could be analyzed, meeting minutes could be analyzed, and reflective journals of teachers could be analyzed. So these are some of the main sources of qualitative data. Now, there are various methods of qualitative data analysis. Some of the popular ones include thematic analysis, where the researchers are interested in identifying main themes in the data that they are analyzing. Similarly, grounded theory approach is another qualitative data method, data analysis method, where theories are developed based on the data. So the theories that we develop are grounded in the theory, in the data. Narrative analysis, where the stories or personal accounts of the participants are analyzed, and content analysis, where we categorize and interpret textual information, and content analysis generally is the kind of quantification of the textual or qualitative data. The general process of qualitative data analysis, what is that? So there are again several models. Here we will generally discuss the general process across the various models of qualitative data analysis. So the first step in the general process of qualitative data analysis is basically data familiarization. What happens is that at this stage, or the very first stage, the researchers immerse themselves in data by reading the transcripts, the field notes, or they listen to recordings, interview recordings or focus group recordings multiple times, and so they make initial notes and observations. So that's kind of the researchers are familiarizing themselves with the data. So, or in other words, they are getting the know-how of the data with respect to the research questions that they have collected the data around. Examples of this include, for example, when you are reading interview transcripts from teachers about their classroom experiences and highlighting interesting quotes from those interviews. The second step is coding. Now, what is this? Labeling. Basically, coding is the process of labeling or giving names to or identities to segments of data with codes that represent themes, concepts, and main ideas. So codes could be predetermined, deductive. In some cases, we have predetermined codes in the light of the research questions or objectives, or in other cases where we are approaching the data with a more inductive approach, we can use the inductive approach, so the codes actually emerge from the data. So both of these could be used, these techniques of coding could be used in the coding process. Here is an example. Coding, for example, if you are conducting, you have conducted interviews with, let's say, educational leaders or principals related to the problems or issues that they are facing in running their educational institutions. Some of the data could be coded, such as lack of resources. So one of the issues that they identify could be coded as lack of resources. Similarly, teacher autonomy. And so this is something that we can get while we are conducting interviews with school principals. The third stage is, or the third step in the process of the general process of qualitative data analysis, is generating themes. So what happens is that once we have coded our data, we need to identify main themes or main ideas in the data, and that happens when we group similar codes into broader themes or broader ideas or concepts. These themes basically reflect significant patterns in the data. Themes should ideally capture the essence of what is being said by the participants. Example, again, we can combine, for example, again, we can combine codes such as student disengagement and low motivation. For example, if you are exploring the issue of students' low performance in schools, and teachers or principals identify issues such as students' disengagement and low motivation as contributing factors, what you can do is you can combine these two under a broader theme, and that theme could be named as challenges in student engagement. Then the next process, the next step is reviewing and refining themes. So now we have converted codes into broader themes, but again we need to critically look at our themes, and this actually helps in further refining the themes. So, and consolidating the themes. So ensuring themes accurately reflect the data. When we look at our themes critically in the light of the data that support these themes, we can ensure that these themes accurately reflect the data. We can merge certain themes, we can split certain themes into more than ones or sub-themes, and we can discard certain themes that are not necessary, or maybe they are not actually themes that are representing our data. Examples, again, refining a broader theme such as classroom issues into more specific ones like discipline problems and curriculum misalignment. So now the broader theme of classroom issues has been actually divided into these two: discipline problems and curriculum misalignment. So reviewing and refining themes is another important step. Now again, once we review and refine our themes, the next process or the next step is to define and name those themes clearly. So naming and defining, as the very name suggests, is to clearly describe each theme, what it includes and why it matters. So during this stage, what happens is that we assign names to those themes that capture the essence of each theme. Again, example, naming a theme, for example, administrative bottlenecks, to capture data about delays in decision making in schools. So the data shows that there are certain issues that delays the process of decision making in schools, and so we could name that as administrative bottlenecks. The next stage is interpretation and reporting, which is like the final stage of the qualitative data analysis, or you can also say thematic analysis. At this stage, what we do is we draw connections between themes and research questions. So the themes are then linked back to our research questions, and we interpret meanings, implications, and patterns, and we present findings in a more structured report. And that report, that we structure that report in the light of our research objectives, questions, or hypotheses. Those themes are also need to be supported by quotes from the data or excerpts from the data. Again, example here, for example, if we are reporting that teachers feel empowered when given decision-making roles, which enhances classroom innovation. Again, these are quotes that support, these are themes that are supported by quotes from our interview. They should be supported by quotes from our data. Now here is a simple example in order to elaborate on the general qualitative data analysis. So for example, if we are exploring the role of educational leaders in improving school quality in Pakistan. So first of all, at the data collection stage, we might collect qualitative data through semi-structured interviews with the school principals that explores their role in improving school quality in Pakistan. We could also conduct interviews with head teachers and educational officers. Similarly, we could also make use of focus groups with teachers or parents in order to triangulate our data, and we could make use of document analysis of school improvement plans or policy documents. So these are some of the main data collection tools or processes that we can use to get data in response to our topic or our questions. The second thing is data familiarization. So for example, here we will need to read and reread interview transcripts from school leaders. For example, if we are conducting in urban and rural areas, we will also note main points, such as, for example, the school leaders might report, we don't get enough training. Similarly, parental involvement is very low. We try to motivate teachers by appreciating their work. Now, these are main ideas in that data that we are actually analyzing. So while reading and reading critically, we get to these main ideas. Once we do that, we will need to do the coding. So here are some coding examples. So in interviews, the interviewer or the participant is saying, we hardly have any funds for teacher development. Now this could be coded as lack of professional development resources. Similarly, let's say another participant tell us, I personally mentor new teachers to help them settle. Here again, this could be coded as leadership support, and so this support is coming from the school leader. Again, there is another quote from the data, most decisions are delayed at the district level. So this could be coded as bureaucratic delays or bureaucratic bottlenecks. Here are themes, the generation of themes, further examples from those codes. Now we have codes such as lack of training, lack of mentoring, and outdated methods. These three codes could be then merged into and represented in the form of a theme. That theme could be named as capacity building challenges. Similarly, we could have two codes, data that is coded as bureaucratic delays and data that is coded as centralized control. These could be presented in the form of a theme, systematic administrative barriers. And similarly, we could have codes such as principal motivation, mentoring, recognition. These codes are given to data in our interviews. And so these codes could be put in under the theme transformational leadership practices. Now, we need to review and refine themes. So we need to ensure that the themes that we have come up accurately reflect the participants' experiences. So for example, you might have written capacity building challenges as one of your themes, but by further reflecting on this theme, we could break it into two. For example, teacher professional development gaps and instructional leadership limitations. So this is a way of reviewing and refining themes, improving themes, so that your themes are actually representing your data. So a lot of critical thinking is involved in the process of qualitative data analysis. Interpretation and reporting. The last important stage in qualitative data analysis is that as a researcher, you need to interpret your data, your themes, and then you need to report to make a wholesome report of the whole thing. So examples, for example, here is a way of interpreting and reporting. The data reveals that school leaders in Pakistan often act as informal mentors to compensate for systematic training gaps. Despite bureaucratic constraints, many demonstrate transformational leadership by recognizing and empowering teachers. However, limited authority and resources hinder their ability to implement sustainable change. Now you see that all the data, the themes, the codes have been actually unified into a narrative. And this narrative is a kind of interpretation and reporting of the findings or of the research or a section of the research. So here, in order to support this main finding, we need to include direct quotes from the data to support this. And so the claims or findings in our reports should generally be supported by direct quotes from our empirical data. Now, the data that we have, or the research that we have conducted, we can say that there are these four main themes in the context of this research that have emerged. Number one is instructional leadership in resource-constrained settings. Secondly, navigating bureaucratic challenges. So what do educational leaders do to navigate or to deal with bureaucratic challenges? Similarly, leadership, what role leadership plays in teacher motivation. And lastly, community engagement in school improvement. These are the main themes that we have come up with on the basis of analysis of our data. Here is an example of an interview that has been conducted with the principal of a high school in an urban area, for example. So here is a quote, a direct quote from that interview. We struggle with getting our teachers trained regularly. Most of the training programs are outdated or not applicable to our context. I often try to mentor the new teachers myself. Also, getting any resources approved from the district takes a long time. Despite these issues, I encourage my teachers by appreciating their efforts during staff meetings. I believe when teachers feel valued, they perform better. So the qualitative analysis of this data will lead to coding and then to themes, and then those themes will be presented in a narrative, and then those will be critically analyzed and supported by quotes from this excerpt. Now, excerpt from the transcript and code. So here we give practical examples of this. We struggle with getting our teachers trained regularly. This could be coded as lack of professional development or lack of professional development opportunities. Similarly, another excerpt or quote from the interview: training programs are outdated or not applicable to our context. This could be coded as irrelevance of available training. I often mentor the new teachers myself. Informal mentoring by principal. You could also name these codes in other ways. So this is basically the researcher who has to decide. And so there is like no one size fit all. Similarly, there is another code, getting any resources approved from district takes a long time. This could be coded as bureaucratic delays or bureaucratic bottlenecks. And similarly, these other excerpts are coded, and so you can read these. Now, codes, themes in our data could also be described in order for the researcher to have a better presentation and a better understanding or insight into. For example, the code lack of professional development relates to the theme teacher development challenges, and this could be described as teachers lack access to meaningful and relevant training. Generally, this is the description helps in the authentication of the coding and theming process. So similarly, these other codes have been also described. We could also, so this is also another example of how codes and themes are described in order to authenticate the process of coding and the process of qualitative data analysis. In some cases, the researchers need to also to take notes or to write notes or memos related to the data that they are analyzing. So for example, in the first one, there is a code, we struggle with getting our teachers trained regularly. This is initially ascribed to the code lack of professional development, and this is related to the theme teacher development challenges. So generally, the researcher has put a note on this teacher training gaps mentioned, and similarly all these other things. The process of coding and themes and then writing notes related to that aids to the understanding of the researcher related to data and also to the authenticity of the data analysis process. Now, generally, an example, again, a simple example, sample report section. So what are the report sections where qualitative data is actually reported? So as we said, we began with the data, the coding of the data, or the labeling of the data. The codes were converted into themes. The themes were then critically looked at. They were merged or they were broken into further themes. Those themes are then supported by quotes from the data. Those are turned into a narrative in the light of research objectives. And now at this stage, here are two examples of how a theme is basically presented in a qualitative report. So for example, theme 1, teacher development challenges. Here the theme is first described and then a quote is given there to support this. But in many cases, one quote is generally not enough to support a theme. Some themes are supported by more than one quote, several quotes, and some themes could find support even in one quote from the data. So for example, theme 1, teacher development challenges. School leaders frequently reported a lack of relevant and updated professional development programs. For example, one principal stated, "We struggle with getting our teachers trained regularly. Most programs are outdated and or not applicable to our contents." This indicates a significant mismatch between available training and on-ground needs. Similarly, theme 2, theme 3, theme 4, and 5, and so on. So every theme is first defined, it is described, then it is supported by data from the quotes, and then overall all of these themes are then presented in the form of an overall narrative. So here is theme 3, systematic barriers. For example, this theme has been coded or named as systematic barriers. Administrative inefficiencies were commonly cited. Now here again there is a code that is supporting this systematic barrier. Such delays undermine school level innovation and responsiveness. And similarly, theme 4, teacher motivation strategies. This is, the theme is first described, then the quote in the blue here is supporting this theme. Again, remember, a theme could be supported and should be generally supported by more than one theme, especially where we have multiple sources of data. We need to support themes from more than one respondents or participants, and more than one sources of data. So this is how themes are supported and presented in qualitative data analysis. Once that is done, the next step is to discuss those themes, to analyze those themes, and to provide a critical review of the findings in the light of previous research and previous studies and the researchers' critical analysis. This then leads to implications of the study, and on the basis of that, on the basis of thematic analysis, discussion, and conclusions, we get to the implications. So what are the implications of our research now? That often leads to certain recommendations on the part of the researchers, and to an overall conclusion towards the end of the research report. And in some cases, we also provide suggestions for further studies. Here are some important sources for understanding qualitative data analysis and its various forms, such as thematic analysis, such as grounded theory approach to analysis, and such as discourse analysis. These are some of the important references that you can study, that you can refer to for further understanding the concept of qualitative data analysis generally in social